Hi everyone, welcome to Spiritual Events Directory, Akashic Studies Australia. I'm Jo Fuller. Today I'll be talking about a few different things in regards to Akashic Records and my classes that I run. I just completed a Akashic Records certification class in Sydney over the weekend, also called a beginner's class. So it's a class where people come that might know a little bit about the records but have not used any processes to access the records. So we basically spend the weekend going into the records, out of the records for ourselves, and we also spend a lot of that time reading other people within the group, which is a lot of fun, and finding answers to questions that people might have. And we spent the majority of the Saturday morning learning about the Akashic Records in regards to the history of the records, which is very long and varied. A little bit to do with the religion of the records and science and the metaphysical and so on. So all in all, it was absolutely awesome weekend. We had the most amazing group of people, as we always seem to. Two people from Canberra, so thank you very much for travelling down from Canberra to attend the class in Sydney. The rest of the people were generally from the Sydney area. We had the class in a wonderful space called the Heart Space Manor in Oxford Street at Bondi Junction, owned by Michelle and run by Jacinta. So if you're looking for a really wonderful venue, I can thoroughly recommend it. It has lots of different spaces and size rooms, etc. Great location, close to organic markets and cafes for lunch and coffees, etc. The energy of the space is really quite nice too. The class was pretty amazing, as they always seem to be, and it always seems to be the right people that come to the class, and there is always a reason why people come along and why people don't come along. During the class we practice opening the records for ourselves and go in there and explore what that feels like, and then we learn how to open the records of another person. So we do what we call swap readings during the class. So I always go into the records beforehand and find out who needs to be paired up in their swap readings, and it never ceases to amaze me that the right person or people come along to swap readings. We had a couple of people there working with the light. We had a lady who does a mediumship, so she was very excited about the records. And other people who have done a very, very wide variety of healing modalities and investigated and learnt different aspects of healing and spirituality. So all in all, everybody participated and had so much information to add to the group. So it was really lovely. So that was fantastic. Tonight I probably will have a bit of a chat. I'm doing a video, and then I'll have it ready to schedule tomorrow, because I'm heading off to Melbourne tomorrow morning early, driving over to do a workshop with some wonderful people from Natural Grace Australia, as part of the other work that I do, which is end-of-life doula work. The workshop is about what we do as doulas in regards to the death of a baby or child. So that's for 2 days in Victoria. So I won't be able to stop. I'll be busy driving. So please feel free to watch the video, make any comments. Contact me if you want to and ask any questions. So tonight, I would like to have a little bit of talk about this Akashic Records and science as part of the 2 days beginners class. Usually the first part of the class we go into a lot of information and detail about Akashic Records, which I've been speaking to you about on and off now for a couple of weeks. So tonight I just want to touch on Akashic Records and science. So predominantly we know the Akashic Records is some form of high level of consciousness, some kind of maybe possibly an energy matrix, or something like that. I mean, it's really difficult to really explain what it is, because we really don't know for sure. So within science itself, they do talk a lot about it possibly even being a hologram, or in relation to quantum physics and integral string theories, etc., etc. So that makes it quite interesting in the fact that, you know, these records we talk about, not only are they connected to religion, as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, because they are, you know, are often referred to in the Christian Bible, Jewish Bible, the Quran, and in Buddhism. We're now seeing that there seems to be some form of scientific backing for some kind of energy field or energy matrix, which we could quite easily call the Akashic records. So there's a gentleman that I would like to have a little bit of a chat about tonight. I've got some notes here. His name is Professor Irvin Laszlo. He's written quite a few different books, and I've got some of these books here. There's one here called Science in the Akashic Field. It says there, An Integral Theory of Everything. So that's really interesting reading. It can be quite heavy, so yeah, it's not something you'd probably want to read before bed. Some of the pages I've had to read a few times to try and understand what it means. But the general gist of the book is that it's type of a holographic energy field of matrix of some kind. So that's quite good. And there's also the another one called the Akashic Experience. So that's Science and the Cosmic Memory Field. So there's another one for you to have a look at. Fantastic books to read and to just get a bit of an overview of, you know, we're not just now talking about the Akashic records being some, you know, airy-fairy, you know, does it exist, doesn't exist, you know, we can't touch it, you know, it doesn't exist, it's, you know, woohoo, all that kind of stuff. So we're getting into the real nuts and bolts now that, you know, maybe it does. And I've been working in it now for 10 years, and I know that it is something because of the information that I receive. So Professor Irvin Laszlo is a Hungarian philosopher, and he's a scientist. And he's recognised as a founder of systems philosophy and general evolution theory. So he's not sort of just your run-of-the-mill kind of scientist. He really is involved with you know, the holographic type of things and the quantum field. So his work in recent years has centred on the formulation and development of the Akasha paradigm. A new conception of the cosmos, life and consciousness emerging as the forefront, basically, of contemporary science. So he's got something he talks about called the Akashic Field Theory. And in his book 2004, Science and the Akashic Field, An Integral Theory of Everything, which is, do I have that one? Yes, so it's this book we're quoting from. He postulates, so that means he just, could be something that is relevant, a field of information as the substance of the cosmos. He calls this information field the Akashic field, or the A field. It's a holographic record of all events that have happened in the world. So now we're talking about holograms, not just airy-fairy stuff, you know, that psychics might hook into, or these people that are healers hook into. This is, you know, something that actually exists. So Laszlo describes how such an informational field can explain why our universe appears to be fine-tuned as to form its galaxies and conscious life forms, and why evolution is an informed, not random process. So he's saying that this A field, this energy field, this high level of consciousness, or dimension of consciousness, or whatever we want to call it, is so finely tuned that it basically is the substructure of our world. So we're talking there, you know, electrons, protons, you know, the basic units of what makes us up and the whole universe, which is really, really interesting, because as we know, or as some of you may know, our universe, solar system is forever expanding, which means the Akashic field, or the A field, or whatever you want to call it, is growing. So it's not static, so it's forever changing. Irvin Laszlo has been twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004 and 2005, and he has authored more than 70 books. So he's, pretty interesting gentleman. I'm sure there's much more out there to do with the Akashic field, or holograms, or A fields, or whatever you want to call them, and quantum physics and science. So please feel free to go out there and do a bit more investigating and find out what you can about it. The other thing I wanted to have a chat to you about today too is, so what I've done is I've kind of tried to look at areas within the Akashic Records that supports that the Akashic Records exist. I'm a bit of a person that's quite logical, which you wouldn't know because of the work that I do, but I left school at 18 and I started nursing. So I, from a very young age, liked all that logical, practical stuff. But then when I first saw my first dead person, I started to get interested in reincarnation, and like I could see the person laying there, but they weren't there. Where was the person that made them who they are? You know, where was their essence? So that led me on the journey into reincarnation and to Buddhism and things like that. And then over the years, I've done a few different jobs. And basically I went back and to school and learnt electronics. So I'm an electronic technician and also a telecommunications, senior telecommunications technician as well. So very logical, very practical stuff. But again, energy, which is interesting, electricity, voltage. But always had that spiritual side to me, which kind of just sat there in the background. And I guess you could almost say that I had two parts to my life, where I had the journey looking for answers to my growing, to what happened to me when I grew up or when I was small, and to do with the sexual abuse by dad and all of that, and being the victim, and that whole spiritual side, that growth side. And then a side to me that was very logical and practical, and loved tinkering with things, cars, motorbikes, that groovy stuff, building things. I love to build things. I loved Lego when I was a kid, and being creative like that, painting and drawing. So kind of two different worlds for me in a way. And then I went and worked at Telstra for 15 years. I started off as a technician there, and then went from there into sales, and we would be involved in building large major infrastructure programs for our clients. So not selling mobile phones and not selling data and things like that, more the building of infrastructure for our particular clients. So very designy, that kind of sort of thing. So again, very logical and practical. So then when I left Telstra, I was fortunate enough to receive a package and left, I started to look for look more for answers to, I guess, the pain and things that I was going through from a personal level. And then came across Linda's book, as I told you in the first video. So I've gone from this very, very logical, practical person to more of this spiritual person. And for me, Linda's process and working within the records, it took a while for me to believe that it existed, to be honest. That it wasn't this airy-fairy, cosmosy. Well, I don't even know where it was. So because it was that side of me that was always asking, well, does it really exist? How do you know you're not just talking to yourself and all that kind of stuff? So I then decided, how can I talk to people about the Akashic Records and just say to someone, oh, it's a higher level of consciousness, and that's it. Because to me, that's airy-fairy stuff. And it's mainly because I didn't have that experience behind me. And now, after working in that area for 10 years, I could easily say it is a high level of consciousness and not add to it, because I totally believe in it. However, if I'm talking to someone who, like a student, someone at one of my talks who I'm just introducing the concept to, some people want more proof, I guess is the right thing to do. So I thought, how could I do that? So that's where I put together my talk, and the talk basically covers the history or the Akashic Records through history. So there we talk about, like a couple of weeks we spoke about the Vedas and all of that, and then we spoke about the Akashic Records and religion, and then science, and then we'll talk a little bit tonight too about the metaphysical. So I wanted to kind of cover as broad an area as I could, because you have different people that come to these talks and different people who study different things. So I might have someone at my talk who's quite religious and has heard of the Book of Life, but doesn't know it's the Akashic Records. So to them, then it makes sense. I might have someone who's more logical and practical and very science-based, which is a little bit like myself. You have that proof. So again, that's with Irvin Laszlo and his A-field theory and the integral theories and the holograms, etc. So that gets them then thinking about maybe a possible energy matrix out there. And then we get other people who come that do other forms of healing, light healing. There's so much out there, Reiki, kinesiology, crystal healing. It's just incredible the amount of stuff out there. So where do they fit? So what I've done is I've made a subject or a section of my talk called the Akashic Records and the Metaphysical. So that kind of covers everything else. So some of you will have definitely heard of this gentleman, and his books are incredible, and I thoroughly recommend that you grab some and have a look at them. The next person we're going to be talking about is a gentleman called Greg Braden. I'm not sure if I have one of his books here. I've got them somewhere. So he's written the books called The Divine Matrix, Fractal Time, Spontaneous Healing of Belief, and all those things. So he's really an interesting gentleman, and he has quite often a lot of little videos and bits and pieces on the Gaia website or link on Facebook. But yeah, really, really interesting stuff, and I'm sure a lot of you would have heard of him. So he's internationally known, a pioneer in bridging science. He's very, very much into the metaphysical. He's a computer geologist and a systems engineer. So he's fairly sciencey as well. So between, and one of the books I'm going to talk about just briefly tonight is The Divine Matrix, which I think is absolutely incredible. And again, to me, it's like an energy matrix. So I often postulate with my students, you know, maybe this divine matrix or this energy matrix we talk about is actually the Akashic Records. It just has a different name. So this is really interesting stuff. So he talks about a couple of experiments that the American government did in between 1993 and the year 2000. And then I have a chat to my, excuse me, sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat tonight, what that would mean for us as human beings. So just very briefly, because you can go and grab the book and have a look at it yourself. Experiment 1, though, he was talking about, you know, these photons and human DNA and having them in a vacuum, and the government, the scientists not expecting anything to happen with this human DNA, but when they exposed it to a certain criteria, the DNA changed and it stayed that way. It didn't go back to the way it was, so there was some kind of impact on the DNA within a vacuum. So that was interesting in itself, and then it got the scientists wondering what would happen if we took donor cells with DNA from a human being and we bombarded them with emotional stimuli. So in a nutshell, what they did is they took a soldier, because this is military research, and they took some donor cells and they monitored the donor cells, and they took the soldier and they put him next door to the lab and they bombarded him with emotional stimuli. So, you know, images, graphic images of war and killing and love and sex and a whole bunch of stuff to see what the emotion of that soldier did to his DNA next door in the cell. Well, what was really, really interesting is it had an immediate impact on the DNA itself, and they were quite surprised, and they thought, wow, this is very, very powerful. So a lot of things, it brought up a lot of things, but one of the things I wanted to know was there any time delay between when the soldier felt this emotion and when it reacted in his cells, which was next door. So they brought in an atomic clock. So an atomic clock is a clock that is, I guess the best way to describe it is exact. You know, there's no delay. So they wanted to measure the difference between, you know, the delay. Was there any delay between him feeling an emotion of love, say for example, and the reaction that his cells portrayed? Or was there any delay in the reaction between if he saw something really graphic and horrible, so, you know, really bad, say someone being murdered or something, and then his cells? And what was interesting is that there was no delay, none whatsoever. It was instantaneous. And then they wondered about distance and the time and if it was delayed. You know, he was just next door, so maybe it was just really quick. So they moved him further and further away from the laboratory till they got up to something like 300 miles away, I believe. And still they measured the delay, or trying to measure a delay, I should say. No delay. So that really got them thinking about a lot of things, and we'll have a chat about that just a little bit later. But so if I have some kind of emotional stimuli, my cells react immediately. No delay, nothing, instantaneous. So that means, how does that do that? How does that do that over such a distance? I mean, if the cells are in my body, that's fine. It's going to react pretty much straight away. But when we're that far away, how does it travel, or what does it travel by? So that's where we talk about this divine matrix, this energy matrix, this grid of light, this grid of energy. I have no idea. This is just something for us to have a talk about tonight. So that postulates and brings up a lot of questions for us. So if my cells react to how I feel and what I think, that means a lot to me. So that means that if I'm constantly depressed or sad or angry or happy or joyful, then my body responds physically. It physically responds to that. And I know some of you out there will have known about the Japanese gentleman, I just can't think of his name at the moment, to do with the ice crystals or the ice flakes, and how, you know, you can take ice and you can talk to it, and you say beautiful things to it and it stays lovely and beautiful, and then you take, you know, some ice flakes and you bombard it with negative emotion, and it just goes black and horrible. And so it's this vibration, maybe. So for us as human beings, that's very important. It means if we're more positive, we're more happy, we're joyful, our bodies react to our DNA, our cells react to that. And then if we're negative, or in a negative relationship, or we're not happy or depressed or sad or angry, whatever, or feeling guilt or fear, that reacts with our cells and our body as well. So again, what is it? How does it travel? How do that energy travel? So yes, it's just something to think about. It could be the Akashic records, it could be the Akashic records, it could be the energy matrix within the Akashic records, or it could be some kind of, I don't know, I'm just talking about it tonight. The other thing too it brings up is organ donation. Could quite easily answer some of those questions that are brought up, with people who have, donated an organ to another person, and then that person takes on some of the characteristics of the organ donor. I've heard plenty of stories, and there's lots of stories out there on the internet about, people not drinking beer, and then they might get a heart transplant, and all of a sudden they drink beer. Or they have different feelings for somebody, or, a whole range of things affect the person. So, is there some kind of memory in the organ of that person that has, donated it? And then that person takes on that memory. So again, this is just some things for us to think about, to start thinking outside the square, pretty much. So that was Greg Braden. The other person I would like to have a chat to you about, and I do have one of his books here. Sorry, this is Dr. Michael Newton. So this is a Journey of Souls, and it's a case study of what we say lives between lives. Very, very, very interesting. Excuse me. He is has a doctorate in counselling psychology. He's a certified master hypnotherapist, and is a member of the American Counselling Association. So Dr. Michael Newton talks about how he got involved with hypnotherapy, in particular with past lives. And one day he was doing some work with a client. I think it was to do with smoking or something, and trying to work out how to break that cycle. and he went a little bit further than he anticipated and ended up being in an area that he wasn't used to working in, and it was actually the client's past life of the client. So he realised that his technique could go a lot deeper than just the, getting to the root causes of some of our addictions and things like that. So he did a little bit more work and study and developed a process with that. And it's basically a very intensive age regression technique, looking at past life memories, and then seeing what that all meant for the client. And what was really, really interesting in his books is that he's got a couple of books out. Well, he's got quite a few actually, but 2 books that talk about these case studies. And he's taken, say, 3 or 4 people, and he'll do this past life regression technique on them, and he'll ask them, talk to me about what happened when you died. And they'll say, I died, and I just kind of left my body, and I was looking at it from above, and I was floating, and I was a bit sad because I realised that it wasn't alive anymore. And so that might be one person. And another person would say, I just saw a light. So I went towards the light, and it was really, really fast, and I felt like I was going down a tunnel and blah, blah, blah. And so they'll explain how they reacted to it. And then he would go, and that would be okay, so that would be 3 or 4 people. And then the next set of case studies would be on, where are you going? And then people will explain where they're going. And a lot of people explain things like, I kind of went home. I went to this place where I met all my friends and my family and my soul groups and my teacher. And he might say, well, what are you doing there? I'm just going to kind of regroup for a little while, and then I have to go and have a talk to my teacher about my life I just had. And then somebody else might say, I'm home and I've just got to go and talk to my elders and talk to them about my past life and how I didn't do so good. So there's all these different stories, and then he keeps going with different aspects. So till he comes to a fruition. So he'll come back, he'll go right through that. So you die. How do you die? Where do you go? What do you do when you get there? Now, and the next stage would be something like, well, now I'm ready to come back. And I'm just viewing all these different lives that I could choose and what lessons I might learn in that lifetime. And then he talks about coming back as a new soul, or as a soul into a new body, and the meshing of the soul with the brain and the body and all that stuff. So basically it's right through that time from when we die to when we are reborn. Interesting beyond belief, amazing stuff. And he talks about soul groups and soul clusters and a whole bunch of stuff. So if you're really interested in all of that, I would thoroughly recommend that you grab those books and have a look at them. Amazing. So he's got 2. He's got this one I just showed you, so that's Journey of Souls, and another one to Destiny of Souls. So again, we're just talking tonight about metaphysical, all those other things. Sorry. So the next gentleman I want to talk about is Edgar Cayce, and I'm sure most of you have heard of him, read some of his books. A lot of his books are incredibly very, very interesting, but a little bit heavy, maybe religious-wise. And it was interesting because I was talking to someone today about that, and and they wanted to know why. And I don't really know why, other than it's possible that that was the type of language he was used to. And also that time was, we're talking the 1877 through to 1945. So, those early 40s, 30s and 40s, you could say it was quite a religious type of culture, I guess, in America at the time. So, if he's doing readings for people, then they would probably accept that language better than if it was more maybe airy-fairy language, if I could say that. So I'll just give you an example of that. The Akashic Record seems to be able to tell you, or send you the information in the language that your client understands. So when I do a reading, I will just give the client the information that the records give to me. I often do my Discovering the Akashic Records talk, and sometimes during that talk, towards the end, I will open my own personal records and I will give every person in the class a message. And one day I did this. We had 25 people in the class, and one day I did this, and I, in particular, said to one lady that she needed to tend to her family before she tended to others. Now, I'm not a religious person at all, so I don't talk like that. And I went, "Oh, that sounds quite biblical." And anyway, afterwards she came up and she spoke to me and she said, "I know what you mean, Jo." And I went, "Do you? Because, you know, that's a bit weird for me to speak like that." And she said, "Look, I'm very religious. I'm a Christian, and I go to church, and I work in the church, and I'm a volunteer." And she said, "It's really interesting because my family only said to me the other day, 'Mum, you're going to church too much. We don't see you anymore. What about us?'" So she straight away knew that she was spending way too much time helping out and volunteering at her church, instead of looking after her own family. So that's the kind of thing that can happen as a reader, that you get the information in a particular language or a style of language that you would not normally speak in, and that even reinforces that information is coming from somewhere else. So that's what I think maybe happened with Edgar, and it's a really, really good question, and I probably need to do a bit more research on him and find out a little bit more about his upbringing and that kind of thing. Edgar Cayce, he was what we call a mystic or a psychic, and he possessed this ability to channel while in a trance. So he was kind of like asleep. So he was also called the sleeping prophet. And he's incredible. He's done 14,306 readings, Akashic readings. And they are available on public record in Virginia, in the United States. And he was asked where that information comes from. And he felt that he was getting some of the information from the person, and the records, the Akashic records. So I find that quite interesting. So maybe he was, tapping into their higher consciousness, or what we call their higher self. So, there's this discussion where there's us, but we also have what we call higher self, or higher level or higher self. So maybe that's what it was. So he talks in particular about Course of Records a lot, the Book of Life. And so there's one particular reading here, number 281 to 2833, where he says, "When discussing the Book of Life, he stated that it was the record of God, of thee, thy soul within, and the knowledge of the same." So he's saying here that the Book of Life is the Akashic Records, and it's a book. On another occasion, record number 2533-8, Cayce was asked to explain the difference between the Book of Life and the Akashic Records. So the question was to him, what is meant by the Book of Life? And the answer was the record that the individual person writes upon the skein of time and space through patience, and is opened when the self has attuned to the infinite, and may be read by those attuning to that consciousness. So pretty much he's saying that it's a record that we write for ourselves. And when we're ready and we're open to that, we can access it, pretty much. Then another question he was asked is, well, there's this other thing called the Book of God's Remembrance. What's that? And he says, well, that's the Book of Life. And then they said, what about the Akashic Records? He says, well, that's made by the individual, just as indicated. So these are all the same things. So the Book of Life, the Book of God's Remembrance, the Akashic Records, all the same thing. There's something that is written down, or not so much written down, but recorded, maybe is the best way to say it. So remember, just take note here, those people who are watching this, everything you think, everything you say, all of your actions, all of your words, everything that's said that you maybe don't want to say to yourself even, and the way you feel about yourself, is recorded. So have a really good think about that out there, okay? Try and start being more positive, saying positive things, some self-love, self-compassion, self-worth, because it's all recorded, but not only that, it affects us physically. So we've got so much to learn. It's amazing. And look, we will also have touched on Linda House. So as some of you may know, that this is my teacher. Oops, sorry, that's not a bit bright there, isn't it? This is the Akashic Records, How to Read the Akashic Records by Linda House. It's her first book. So I just want to have a little bit of chat about Linda too, because I've popped her into the metaphysical section. So Linda's done many, many, many years of spiritual searching, and so about 40 plus years I think now, and you know, she's now a doctor, Dr. Linda Howe, and she went to a master's at a Theosophical University in Chicago, and that's actually where I'm doing my animal chaplain study as well. So she's worked in the records in this area for a long, long time, and would have to be one of the, you know, the most, I guess, leading authorities on the Akashic records. And, you know, she talks to people like Irvin Laszlo and a lot of different people about it. She sees it as an infinite spiritual resource of empowerment and transformation, and I'll totally agree, and I'm sure the students I've just had in the last couple of days on the weekend would totally agree as well. So she's basically been inspired by her records to put together a really, really interesting curriculum. So her first subject or module is opening records and getting used to going in and out of the records, practicing. Her second module that I also teach is past lives, ancestral pattern work, energy healing, things like that. Then the third subject that I also teach through Linda is healing through the Akashic records, and that's where we really go into some deep, very, very deep areas of our lives and past lives as well, where we have what we call sacred wounds that we may need to heal and understand and shift and move on from. So we would take that, something like a sacred wound, in my example would be the domestic violence I went through as a child and the sexual abuse from dad, and turn that into a sacred opportunity, which I did so back in 2011, which is why I'm now teaching. So Linda was given the pathway prayer process to access the heart of the Akashic records back in 2001, and that's the basis of her work, which I use, and a lot of other people around the world use as well. So she's written 3 books, How to Read the Akashic Records, which is the yellow book I showed you, Healing Through the Records, and Discover Your Soul's Path. So very, very interesting. Let me just have a bit of a think about what else I wanted to talk about tonight. Okay, so some of you from listening to my videos may be dabbling a little bit in the records. I did have someone ring up a few weeks ago, quite stressed because they had opened the records but didn't really know what to expect. So I just want to reiterate that even though you might go into YouTube and you might see Linda's work and you might say, oh, I'm going to open the records and see what happens, just be a little bit cautious, and nothing bad can happen to you. No evil spirits can attach themselves or anything like that, but it is a different dimension of consciousness, and it could feel different and strange. So just be aware of that. So maybe the best thing to do would be to look at some of Linda's videos, and I would thoroughly recommend that you read the book, the first book, or do work with a practitioner online. There's plenty of online courses, etc., or you can come and do a class with me, whatever you want to do. But definitely get someone to help you with that if you're not experienced in that area, because it can be very, very different, and some of the information that you can get, you may not be sure if it's coming from the records or coming from yourself. And that's why I love to teach people how to open the records, and I also love to see them read another person within the class environment, because then they're getting validation and they know what is real and what isn't real in regards to the actual reading. So that was one thing. The other thing too is the questioning. So the way you would question or put your questions together is really, really important. So again, we spoke a little bit about, you can use yes or no answers, the yes or no questions, which closed, So you'd only get a yes or a no answer. And sometimes you just want a yes or no answer, and that's fine. Other times you want to go deeper and deeper and find the root cause of what's happening with a person. So then you have to get really used to using questions to go deeper and deeper and deeper. So I'll give you some examples of that. So we're talking about what we call effective questions within the records. So in regards to examples, so to do with relationships, we might say, why are my partner and I together? That's a good one. What am I not seeing, or why am I not seeing it within the relationship? How can I change my perspective and see what I need to see? My partner is violent towards me. How can I find the courage and strength to lead this relationship? So it's that constant going deeper and deeper, and then you would get an answer. You go, okay, well, how do I do that? What do I need to do to put things into place? Some questions that we might use for family is, I do not get along with my husband's mother, or it could be the other. I don't get along with my mother's mother or mother's father. How can I better handle, accept, change this relationship with my father-in-law or mother-in-law? And then you'll get some information. It's like, well, okay, well, how then do I do that? So it's always deeper and going down deeper and deeper and deeper until you get that real solution to whatever's happening with you. So, and it's really it's a conversation. It really is about having a conversation, and it's not a psychic reading. So if you're looking for a psychic reading, the Akashic Records is not a psychic reading. Having said that, though, I do wonder where psychics get their information from, and I'm pretty sure that it's probably from the records, from somewhere within the records, because the records is all encompassing. So the other thing I wanted to just touch on too is meditation. So it's very important to, I guess, meditate generally, because it's so good for us. When it comes to the Akashic Records in particular, with Linda's process, she has a lovely meditation that she uses within her book. So if you buy the book, How to Read the Akashic Records, there's a lovely meditation there. You can use it as often as you like. I use that meditation, and I have my own meditations as well. So I think it's lovely to have our own. And so and there's some great apps out there that have got hundreds and hundreds of different meditations. But I just find if I have my own meditation, it's very personal for me. I do have a few different meditations that I also use within the class, because sometimes people are just not, I guess, tuned in, or they might have had a bad morning or a bad week, and they're just kind of not aligned, ready for study or ready to access the records. So I have a lovely 17-minute meditation where it's just a matter of going through and realigning our chakras, making sure that we're all nice and relaxed, we're aligned, and then we can go into the records. Now, meditation seems to really supercharge our access into the records. It gives lots of energy. So if you are dabbling with Linda's work at home, you haven't had a teacher to help teach you, and you're not sure if it's really working, grab yourself a great meditation or use your own. So you would do your meditation and then straight away access the records, and that should supercharge it. So you can give that a try if you're having some problems. And of course, just to touch on it, there's quite a lot of different meditations out there. I mean, just some of the examples, we've got transcendental meditation, we've got guided visualization, we've got Zen, we've got mindfulness, even Qigong, and Kundalini, a whole bunch is out there. I mean, I'm just touching on a few. So, meditation, fantastic. Now, what else did I want to have a chat to you about tonight? Some of the uses for the Akashic Records is really quite interesting. You can use the records for, I guess, just about anything. The uses that I use it for, of course, is for work. So I do readings, Akashic readings for people, and that can be on any subject, so relationships, family, career, health. And then through that we might go into healing, energy work. I always ask if it's an ancestral pattern that's an issue, or past life that could be an issue. And if it is, then we go deeper into those areas and work on that within the records. So readings can also be done for on animals, pets, houses, buildings, towns and parks. And you're probably aware of my Akashic travelling video that I put up the other day, and that will start sort of coming together a little bit more over the next couple of months, just to show you what we can do with the records. If you are working with the records, don't forget you can do some great stuff and be very creative, because the records really take us right to a soul level. So don't be afraid to work within your records. Just even if you've had a bad day, you know, a couple of students we had on the weekend were nurses, and they, you know, work in very, very demanding areas, and I can imagine that, you know, they would come home and be absolutely exhausted. So if they wanted to, they could, you know, grab a cup of tea, drink or something, and just relax and sit in the records, open them and sit in there. And how that would work is that the records vibrate at such a high level that it pulls our energy up, and heals whatever's going on in us. So if we've had a really huge crappy day, that will kind of smooth it out, and we'd feel very at peace, very calm, and it's kind of like recharging, I guess. So again, those people who are working with the records and are practicing in there and just having a little bit of fun, try that. That's great. The other thing you can do too is listen to music. And one of the things that I do in class is quite often I will play a piece of music while we're out of our records and write down the emotions that come to us from that music. In particular, I had a gentleman one day who played the didgeridoo. So he came in and bought his didgeridoo and he played this beautiful piece. And we wrote down all this information that we got. And then I got everyone to open their records, personal records, and we listened to the same piece of music on the didgeridoo, and we got totally different information, and we went places and people did all kinds of things. It was really, really interesting. So you could do that yourself. Take a piece of music, listen to it just in general, and see how it feels, and then open your records and listen to the piece of music again and see what experiences you get with that. The same with painting or writing, poetry, anything like that, that you can you know, work in your general state and then go into the records and open them and find out how it feels to do that. So you can have lots of fun in there as well. One other thing that you can do that I do is study in the records. So I find if I'm a bit stuck on a question, or I want to just, I guess, be more focused, I would open the records and say, okay, I want to focus on this particular essay or whatever it is that we're working on, and before you know it, you kind of answered it and it's been an hour and it feels like it's 5 minutes. So you could try doing that if you're actually studying. That's quite lots of fun. And you know, I have people who use the records for all kinds of things, to validate some of the things that they're looking into and researching, and I guess, you know, you really have to think about if it's this vast library or vast supercomputer or vast holographic quantum computer. It's incredible. I mean, there's even talk, and people have spoken that, you know, Leonardo da Vinci accessed the records to get all of his information, and other amazing scientists, and they got their inspiration from the records. You know, Michelangelo with his art, and I have read somewhere, I must try and find that reference to Salvador Dali. I love his artwork, and he talks about accessing the records while he slept, and he didn't know. He would dream of his paintings, how would they look, and then he would wake up and paint them in minute detail. So that came from somewhere. We want to call it inspiration, that's fine. So, but yeah, so there's some of the things you can do with it. I will be doing more readings on buildings and places, and maybe historic things. But you know, you can use it for supercharging your own healing modality, like, you know, Reiki or kinesiology or something like that. So you just have a little bit of a think about it. All that I ask, I guess, is that, you know, you would respect both healing modalities and fully understand the the consequences of combining the two. So when I talk about that, I'll just give you an example. So I might wake up in the morning and would open my records, and I would ask my master's teachers and loved ones what I would need to know today maybe, and they might tell me what's happening today or what I might need to be more patient or something like that today. Then I also have been studying A Course in Miracles. So then I would say, God, what would you have me do today, and what would you have me say, and to whom, to fulfill my purpose. So even though that is part of like Course in Miracles, it is sort of being supercharged, I guess, by being within the records. And then I might spend a little bit of time doing some Reiki on myself. So just, tuning into my body. Where am I tight? Where's there a little bit of pain? What's going on with that? Is it something that I have to talk to the records about? Is it because I went for a walk yesterday, or I went for a swim, or whatever it is? So there's some of the, sort of just a little bit of a way, I guess, of integrating the two of them, or even the three of them. Okay, so I think that's probably all we'll do tonight. Next week we'll probably go in and have a bit more of a chat about past lives, and I'll give you some information on sort of how we do that, or how I've done it, and what I've experienced with it. So look, feel free to send me any messages or emails or whatever you want to know, more information. As I said, I'll be heading off to Melbourne early in the morning, so I will pop this up on Facebook to be scheduled to be available at the 3 o'clock time slot. So I hope you've enjoyed tonight. It's again, it's just wanting you to understand the background of the records, giving you that more of a, I guess, a solid understanding of it, that it's not just some wishy-washy airy-fairy, I don't know, thing. There's a lot of scientific research going into it, and a lot of experiments, and a lot of things happening, and there's just so much more out there than we fully understand. And as I said, I've been doing this now for 10 years. I'm still getting my head around it all. So look, have a wonderful week, wonderful weekend, stay safe. And if you're working within the records, have fun, respect the process, and take it easy, nurture yourself. Try not to spend too much time in there. If it's the first time you're going in, spend a few minutes in there just so you get used to that energy. If you are working with Linda's process, one of the best things to do to really get some good results is to practice. So practice, and offer free readings to people, family and friends, even your pets, just so you get the energy flow happening, and you get the validation. Because once you get the validation, then when information is coming from the records, or if information is coming from you yourself. So happy Akashic Records, and stay safe, and I'll catch up with you next week. Okay, bye.